Hello, Arizona, and welcome to this episode of Valley of the Sun Real Estate Show. I'm your host, Jayson Bates, the lender who lives in and is a part of your community. As I say each and every podcast, if you would like to reach out to the show, you can do so by visiting my webpage at www.valleyofthesunrealestateshow. From there, connect with me on any social media platform. Email me directly. I certainly would love to hear from you. And if you're a first-time podcast listener or listener to this podcast, well, I'm humbled that you chose this podcast over all the other podcasts that are out there as I try to bring you all the information that's relevant to Phoenicians and Arizonans about the real estate market. So thank you for listening to my podcast. And on today's episode, I'm very honored to have a very special guest here. His name is Reginald Gibbons. He's the program administrator of Save Your Home Arizona, which is a division of the Arizona Department of Housing. So thank you, Reginald, for joining me today. Really appreciate that.
Hey, thank you, Jayson. It's my pleasure to have this opportunity.
Awesome. And we're going to cover today the pathway to purchase. This is a pretty hot program right now. I've hired, I see some agents that actually put that on the listing that this qualifies for the pathway to purchase. But yet the consumer doesn't know what it is. So we're hopefully going to fill some of those gaps in for you, the consumer, because this is a fantastic program that's available. This podcast being out there to help educate people, I think part of the misconception out there is it takes a lot of money or you got to save a lot of money or something to get into a home. That's why we see these occupancy rates on these apartments at 98, 97% occupancy.
Yes.
I just don't think people know that this money's out there. So hopefully we'll reach some people and make them aware that there's some money out there for them.
You're exactly right. That's the goal. And that's a part of the intent of the program is to assist what we would refer to as credit-worthy Arizonans in purchasing a home, where the down payment becomes the barrier. This program, by design, overcomes that barrier and enables those who are qualified and desirous of purchasing a home to do so.
Yeah, and I think there's been studies here recently of millennials, and one of the biggest barriers to entry into the housing market is saving for that down payment. Student loan debt is at a record high throughout the country. I think Julian Castro has even spoken about affordable housing in the United States and how hard it is to save for down payment. So this program really, really fulfills a big niche.
Right.
Okay, so let's go over a little bit about the history of this program. So talk to me about the history of the program and how it came to be.
Hey, gladly. The funds for this program come from the U.S. Department of Treasury via the Hardest Hit Fund program. And by design, there's 18 states and D.C. that received those funds. And it was areas that were, severely hit by negative equity, by unemployment, which obviously precipitated into foreclosures and delinquency rates. And so we received these funds back in late 2010 in order to design, develop, and implement a program that could assist consumers with the avoidance of foreclosure where possible. And so we do various things under that program, and that's been going along successfully up until now. And what we're getting into with some of the recovery is that there's some parts of the state that are recovering still more slowly than others. And we were looking at the ability to offer down payment assistance, or what is commonly referred to as DPA, with the funds. And because the funds by design were targeted toward foreclosure and foreclosure prevention, we had to stay close to that objective even as we rolled out down payment assistance. And that's why we have 17 select cities within the state of Arizona that are eligible for the funds, Maricopa County, or Maricopa City. But within Maricopa County, there's Buckeye, Avondale, El Mirage, Levine, and Surprise, that are Maricopa County cities that are eligible for this assistance. And in doing the evaluations, we looked at distress factors across the state and said, okay, what's the baseline? Where are some areas that are still underperforming those distress factors? And what can we do in order to help the revitalization and or stabilization of those communities? And that was this pathway to purchase.
Gotcha. So this is somewhat of a piggyback off the neighborhood stabilization kind of deal.
Exactly. A lot of that was stimulus dollars that were poured into the state to assist in this space. And as it evolves, you're still just building on what's been done.
Gotcha. All right, beautiful. So again, it's only select cities, right? It's not for everybody, and we want to make that perfectly clear, or not for every city, I should say.
Correct.
So we want to make that perfectly clear. And I'll put a link to in my show notes here for the website where you can see which cities that are eligible for that throughout the state of Arizona. You mentioned a few there here in Maricopa County, which is primarily, I think, where the majority of this is probably, I would imagine, being utilized.
Yeah, that's true. However, Tucson and South Tucson are eligible cities. They have not yet launched, but we anticipate being able to provide as much assistance there as we do in the 15 or so other cities outside of that.
So the entire city of Tucson?
Tucson city limits and South Tucson, which, right, being in Arizona for 20 years, I did not know until, the development of this program that they were two different cities, but they are.
Yeah. Wow. Okay, great. Yeah. That's awesome. That's great.
Yes.
Now, talk to me about who the pathway to purchase was intended for. What?
Good. The kind of, if you will, demographic or typical consumer for the pathway to purchase program is first and foremost the consumer willing to purchase in the targeted cities, right? Because you got to be willing to buy there. A primary residence, so it's not for investment properties. However, you can buy a 2 to 4 unit property. So we've had some people who decided they wanted their first property to be something that would allow them to actually build wealth and grow their income. So they're buying a fourplex. They're going to occupy one of the units and they're going to rent the other 3 units, which will pay the mortgage payment. So that is permissible. However, so single family to 1 to 4, owner occupied. And then the income limit is capped right at about $92,000 for the purchasing consumer. So that's not even household income.
That's,
if you have a household of 5, but only 2 people are going to be on the loan, it's the income of those 2.
That's huge.
That's huge.
I mean, 92,000, that covers a lot of people, right?
Exactly. And that's the intent, because it's not, if you will, a needs-based program. It's a program targeted to meet a need, and that is the stabilization, revitalization of select communities. And so you want all those who are willing to buy in those areas to be able to buy.
Now, is it limited to specific properties? I know some down payment assistance programs are for only, foreclosed properties or historic, there's different limitations on certain things.
No, great question. The only property restriction is there's a purchase price cap, about $356,000, a little bit of change there, but that's ample, right? It's the location in the target city. It's the construction, if you will, single family, 1 unit to 1 to 4, not more than a 4 unit property. And then it must be owner occupied by the buyer. Those are the 4 conditions, if you will, of the eligible property.
Okay. So now next question would be, does it follow the Fannie Mae guidelines as far as qualification for a borrower, or is it FHA eligible? What?
Great question. I'm so glad you asked that. Listen, a lot of people during the foreclosure crisis, and particularly at the height of it, were bothered that their loan wasn't owned by Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, right? Because those are government-sponsored entities, which enabled better options or solutions to be offered to those consumers. And some would go, well, how did I know who was going to own my loan? And you get it. In the industry, they don't control it.
Right.
This product is a Fannie Mae product. So it's Fannie Mae HFA preferred. By the HFA preferred, that means that there's some reduced mortgage insurance requirements. So for the lender, explain that to the consumer, that improves affordability, that improves the ability to purchase. Really nice, and it is attractively priced. Right now, it's sitting at about 4%, right? At today's rate. That's a fixed rate, 30-year fixed rate loans are the only thing on it. So nice features to the fact that it is a Fannie Mae product.
Okay. And there's no silent second or any kind of restrictions. I guess we can get into that in a little bit, but we can. And let me just kind of touch on that a little bit, since you hit on it. We don't want people to miss the fact. I'm a big fan of the
of the expression that there's no such thing as a free lunch. You know, some of us from our era grew up, you know, with the concept of free lunch. But what I mean by that is this: while there may be no cost to you, the recipient, there is a cost. Somebody pays. And when it comes to this down payment assistance program, Pathway to Purchase, it offers up to 10% of the purchase price, capped at $20,000. So if you're buying a $200,000 house, you could be eligible for $20,000. That $20,000, or whatever the amount, is provided in the form of what we call a soft second mortgage. And that's why the Fannie Mae product is really important, because it plays into the qualification criteria of that underlying first mortgage. But that soft second mortgage has a 0% interest rate. It has a 0 payment, and it is for a 5-year period of time, which simply states if you, the recipient of the assistance, will own and occupy the property for the 5 years, the debt will be forgiven. At the end of that time, you have no obligation to the assistance. You've satisfied it. Now, with that, we like to make sure people understand, in the event that you want to vacate or you want to sell prior to the completion of the 5 years, you're not restricted from doing so. It's just like owing as much as you would owe if you didn't get the assistance. You have to repay the assistance. But again, with no interest and with no payments during the time in which you occupy the property. So it's really only upside, understanding what's my obligation in the event that I'm not able to fulfill the 5-year term.
Yeah, it's almost, I mean, I have people approach me, well, that's like free money, Jayson.
Yeah, yes, it is. I mean, we say, you know, but here's the catch, right? We want you to occupy the property. We want you to remain in the neighborhood for a period of time so that stability can return to communities.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the key to having your investment grow for you, is that stability.
Yes.
If you have a bunch of, you know, people turning over properties in a particular neighborhood, doesn't really help the neighborhood at all.
No.
So that's good. Okay. So, elaborate a little bit there for me on how the program is actually funded.
Okay. The Arizona Department of Housing received $267 million, so approximately, from the U.S. Department of Treasury for the administration of the Save Our Home AZ program. So that's a part of all that foreclosure prevention. And we have multiple components within that program. There's monthly mortgage assistance, short sale assistance, modification, various components under which we distribute those funds. When we developed and rolled out this down payment assistance program, we allocated some of that funds toward that. So there's been $48 million allocated toward the down payment assistance component. And with the cap of, right, $20,000 a unit, right, we expect that we'll do somewhere north of 2,500 units, given the fact that the average assistance thus far has been about $16,500.
So is this program going away anytime soon? I mean, is this something that will continue for quite some time, or do people need to rush out and get this money like right now?
Well, you know, it is a sense of first come, first serve.
Yep.
And yet there's enough funding available, and the projections would indicate that it'll go about 1.5 to 2 years at this current rate and pace. So it's not a must do now, right? But it is a know now, decide now. And if now isn't the time, prepare for a little later, so that you can take full advantage of it.
Yeah, I mean, and what better time than now, really? I mean, a lot of people are coming out of the penalty box, if you will.
Exactly, yes.
So demand is going to become high over the next couple of years. If you talk to local economists, they're predicting 2017 to be a really stellar year in real estate, as people come out of that penalty box. And we've talked about, you know, saving for a down payment. It's tough right now. It is tough for a lot of folks. So this is a great program. So prepare your credit now. Talk to them today. Get yourself prepared so that you're ready in 6 months. Okay, so now let's go over some of the details of this program. You mentioned some of the cities and things like that. What other things should a consumer be looking for or be aware of in this program?
You know, really, it gets back into some of the criteria for qualifying for the assistance. A consumer is required to do home buyer education, which we call HBE. And that's just because we want to have better informed buyers of properties, you know, if we can. It's not an extensive course, but it gives enough exposure to things like debt ratio and encouragement of debt management, so that hopefully they don't buy in over their head and or get in and then begin to build in over their head. You know, I want to buy this, I want to, you know, put in a pool, I want to do that. And so some of that comes with the home buyer education. There's some debt ratio restrictions, but they're fairly flexible. It's 45% on the back end. That's more for lenders, but it's not a front end, back end. It's just a back end of 45. So it allows ample room for the consumer. And then the only other thing, which I would say is probably a key, I don't think it really applies to as many consumers seeking the assistance of this program, but there are some, is you can't own any other residential real estate and receive this assistance. So if somebody owns presently and they're looking to buy up, if you will, and or buy down or buy over, I like to say, you have to sell what you presently own as a part of the process of buying what you want to own with the assistance.
Okay, so you can't buy a home 2 years later, use the down payment assistance again to buy another home as an owner occupied.
Right. You can't do that. Or you can't own a home right now and use the down payment assistance to buy another home and convert what you own into a rental, right? Because we're not looking to assist people with building their real estate portfolio, if you will. We're looking to assist people with stabilizing communities. And that's why we say, if you have a residence, great, retain it, live in it, do with it what you want. If you want this assistance, you must sell it.
Yeah, and the 45%, I want to elaborate there on that a little bit. That is pretty generous. That kind of falls in line with the qualified mortgage rules, which obvious with Fannie Mae and stuff like that. It's 45%, but that's 45% of the gross income. Some people say, well, I only make I make $2,500 a month or whatever gross, but then I only take home maybe $1,800 or whatever after tax and insurance and things like that. It's based on that $2,500 a month income.
That's exactly right, which enables them to qualify for something. And I like to remind people sometimes when they say, well, why the gross? You go, well, that's how the industry historically has always evaluated consumers for eligibility with mortgages. And we just wanted to stay true to the process. We're not looking to hinder it. We're looking to enhance it.
Right. Now, one last thing here about the program detail. Are there any restrictions from the seller's standpoint in contributing toward closing costs? That's a big deal right now. 90% of the contracts I see right now have seller concessions as part of the contract.
Thank you for asking that question. No, again, we're not interrupting the standard flow of business. We're just looking to encourage the standard flow of business. So a person could receive 10% of down payment assistance from our program, maybe with the usual seller contribution of 3%, right? So that covers their closing costs in many cases. So they walk into the purchase of a home with no money out of pocket, a 90% loan to value first mortgage with reduced MI and an extremely attractive 30-year fixed rate loan. You go, in most cases, they're going from where they're renting to buying and actually saving.
Yeah, exactly. Why rent when you can buy? I
mean, for less.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy the amount of rent that people are paying out there, and just don't understand that these programs are out there. So I really appreciate you coming on. Okay, so a couple last things here. If somebody wanted to put 5% down, could the other 5% be used for closing costs? And on top of that, is there any portion of it that could be used to buy down the interest rate?
Great questions. And again, some of these things are things that consumers may not be aware of, but hopefully, if lenders or realtors are hearing, they catch it. And you asked me about the restrictions a consumer or buyer should be aware of. I want to say, bear in mind, what I don't say basically means it doesn't apply. But sometimes you really got to say it because people don't realize it, right? There's no restriction on how much money a consumer can bring to the transaction because there's not a minimum LTV. So if they have 10% and they were going to get a 90% loan before, with this 10%, you can get an 80% loan. And now you've eliminated mortgage insurance.
Right.
There is no asset restriction. So if they're selling a house that they have $100,000 of equity in, they can sell that house, retain that $100,000 of equity, and still receive this 10% down payment assistance to buy the new home.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So it can be piggybacked. It can be used in any way. It's all about stabilizing the community.
Exactly. And through that, you're saying structure the loan that qualifies the consumer for the purchase of the home however you need to with the 10%. You can do a 95% first mortgage, 5% down, and 5% to cover closing costs. Any variation in between that, it is 10% of the purchase price capped at $20,000 for down payment and or closing cost assistance, however the deal is structured. There is no buy down of the rate. I wanted to follow up on because we set a fairly low rate at 4%. Yeah. and there's the reduced MI. So we really believe in evaluating the market and monitoring the trends, that even a year or two from now, if rates were even a little lower than they are, it's not likely a consumer could refinance out of this product, though they could without restriction, and actually improve their situation because they lose the benefit of the reduced MI. That's major. On this product at 95%, it's capped out at 16%. If you're not doing this product, that's tapping out at 25 to 30%. It's a major difference in monthly payment.
Over half, right at half of
exactly.
That's big. And
yeah.
And I want to make it clear, because on the MI mortgage insurance side, it is credit score driven. So when you have a lower credit score and you can reduce your MI, that's huge. That's huge. That is a big deal, because that can get very expensive on a lower FICO score.
And you mentioned FICO score. The minimum credit score for qualifying for this program is a 640, which is a little less than what you see in the open market at 660.
And I do free evaluations of people's credit all the time. So if you're not quite there, we certainly can get you on the path to get there.
That's why it's called Pathway to Purchase.
There's a pathway to purchase. There you go. I love it. And I want to end with that. Hey, Reginald, thank you very much for being a part of this. And I'm going to put up the website. It's
azhousing.gov. azhousing.gov.
Okay.
Yep.
And from there, you can check out the pathway to purchase, and all the guidelines that we've gone over are on that website.
Yes.
In great detail. So if you're following that website, it's all right there. It makes it.
There you go. Hey, thanks for having us on, Jason. I appreciate it greatly.
Yes. Thank you, Reginald. Really appreciate your time. And for everybody out there, if you want to check out past episodes of this podcast, please visit my website at www.valleyofthesunrealestateshow.com. Reach out to me. And if you're listening to this on iTunes, please write that review, as it is one of the only ways that I have to help improve the show. So until next time, I hope to see you out there shopping for a home very soon. Take care, everyone. Jayson Bates, NMLS 220798, mortgage banking license 1796, equal credit opportunity lender. Sound effects provided by soundj.com.